gums at each other any chance they get. The fight clock is brought to you by Modelo.
It's time
for you to sit back, relax, and listen to a complete and fucking utter armchair expert give his completely and utterly useless opinions on the one hell of an amazing sport that is MMA.
G'day, guys. Do forgive me if I start coughing or my voice sounds hoarse. I did come down with something a little earlier in the week and kind of affected me for a few days there, but I am here to do the podcast very late, literally dropping the day of the fight, so I do apologise for that. It was due to the sickness, but let's get on with it. UFC 305, quite a build-up, of course. Was definitely built up to be a massive event, but unfortunately, it kind of ended in disappointment. On the plus side, we'll talk about the pluses first. Kai Kara France and Dan Hooker both got wins. So, sorry about that. So we both we got what we wanted in that aspect, but we probably didn't get what we would have wanted as far as Izzy and Bam Bam winning, because neither of them did. They both lost their fights. That's twice now for both of them on Australian soil, which is a shame. And Izzy lost his chance at the title. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's definitely going to be interesting for both of them. I guess they're getting to that point now where they're going to be at a crossroads, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do. In all seriousness, though, congrats to Dricus. He came on to... He defended his belt against one of the most active middleweights ever in one of his biggest markets and handled it with class. While I still definitely don't like him for how he handled the Sean fight, and particularly the aftermath of it, I'm going to give him that. That was pretty good. Alex Pereira called him out after it. That was interesting. But yeah, man, I really kind of hope the Sean rematch happens first, because despite what Israel Adesanya's coach said about Whittaker deserving it first, which kind of just sounds like the coach protecting Izzy there, giving him the easier fight if Whittaker were to win. Sean definitely does deserve it. I mean, in my opinion, he deserved it anyway, but he certainly deserves it now. But was definitely a good atmosphere, as always. Australia showed itself very well, but it just didn't quite have the ending I would have wanted, is all. But yeah, that was UFC 305. And when I come back, we'll talk about UFC 306 and why I feel it probably doesn't quite cut the first card to be at the Sphere. But anyway, all that and more when I come back. UFC 306, I believe it's Mexican Independence Day, interestingly, because all the posts about the event are in Spanish, I believe, and it is the inaugural card to be held at the Sphere in Las Vegas. I'll be honest, I don't think the card quite measures up to what should be the first card for the inaugural event at this new facility, but I am nonetheless very keen for the 3 main fights on the main card, and I will have a look at the prelims to see if there's any. No, there's not. So we'll just talk about those fights. Interestingly, according to the odds, the 2 title fights are even. Let me just point that out first of all. That's interesting. But we, of course, have number 3 ranked Brian Ortega versus number 13 ranked Diego Lopes. 10 in between them, which is interesting, which is, of course, the rematch from the fight that didn't happen at UFC 303, which I believe I discussed in the last podcast, what happened there. They're saying that Lopes is going to take out Ortega. Given Ortega fought Volk, I would love it if Ortega took the fight, but and also I'm sure everyone who bets on it would love it, but yeah, we'll see what happens there. But we now get into the business end of things, ladies and gentlemen. For the women's flyweight title, Alexa Grasso defends her belt against Valentina Shevchenko. And like I said, they're saying it's dead even. These are actually pretty good match fights. The champ's fighting the number 1 ranked person, which, I mean, you would think would be the most ideal situation, but of course the rankings aren't always indicative of who would be fighting for a title. But now, of course, the main event of the evening for the UFC men's bantamweight title, Sugar Sean O'Malley defends his belt against Merab Dvalishvili, or Dvalishvili, I don't know. I've always said it, me pronouncing names isn't good, but of course I'm going for the Sugar Show in that one. Definitely hope he retains his belt yet again. Second title defense for him in this big event, of course. But yeah, that's UFC 306, guys. Like I said, not going to lie, probably didn't live up to the hype. But I'm definitely keen for those fights nonetheless. But going to take another break, and when I come back, just a couple things that I want to end off the podcast with. It's probably going to be a pretty short one, so I do apologize for that, but just want to end off the podcast talking about a few things. So all that and more when I come back. So yeah, that's about it, guys. Can't really talk too much about returns because I already talked about that in the last podcast. As I said, Alex Pereira returns on UFC 307. UFC 308 is going to be a stacked card. Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway. Oh, that's going to be interesting. Bobby Knuckles versus Hamza Chimaev, the fight they've tried to make so much, that's coming up on there. And also the return of Cyril Gane since his last fight with John Jones against Alexander Volkov. Of course, I'll save the rest of the talk for another podcast. But I would just like to finish the podcast on one final note. Demetrious Mighty Mouse Johnson, the man that Dana White traded for Ben Askren, has retired. yeah, what like a post said, you want someone to give your kids a role model in MMA. Look no further than Mighty Mouse. Just such a good, down-to-earth person, and of course, such a good fighter. Like I'll never forget. Back in the early days when I used to get into fighting, my dad's mate would always excitedly say, "Mighty Mouse is fighting," when he was on the card. Yeah, Dana White definitely made a mistake getting rid of him for Ben Askren of all people, because we know what happened there, of course. But just want to say all the best to him in retirement, and good on him for accomplishing all of what he set out to do in another league. But anyway, guys, that'll be it from me. Hope you guys enjoy 306. Until next time, catches.